We're recording here.
All right, I'm calling to order the Library Board of Trustees Committee of the Whole meeting on Wednesday, April 20th at 6:01 p.m. And we'll do a roll. Trustee Stahl? Here. Trustee Lazan? Here. Trustee Warren?
Present.
Trustee Pika? Present. Trustee DeRocher is also here. Not present are Trustee Retsika or Trustee Richardson. Also present is Sandra Whitmer, Director, and department heads, Kathy Gatos, Paul Doberson, Mary Kelly Marquez, and Duncan Jones. So let's begin.
There's no one has requested remote attendance and participation, so that can come on.
Oh, good. Okay. Do we need to approve this agenda?
If you'd like, we don't typically put that on the
Okay.
agenda.
I think that we will do that. Any public comments?
I don't have any
public
mail.
Okay. All right, let's get on to our review then of the first one. Take it away, Sandy.
Okay. Well, I'll walk through this. I think I said in my memo, my intention was not to go line by line through the big sheets, but if you have questions, you can ask as I'm reviewing kind of the general information. And as you can see, all the managers are here. So if you have any questions about specific areas of the budget that they're responsible for, they can answer those questions. So first of all, on page 1 of this little regular size paper, you can see that our property tax extension income that is expected is up about $50,000 over last year. And then the other big note here about the draft that you have is that there's some specific direction and decisions that the board needs to make with regard to salary and benefits. So those items were not included in this draft of the budget. Those can be updated next month and then as needed in June. So without those items included, the overall budget has a surplus of $1.1 million. In the corporate fund, it's actually a bigger surplus because the building and maintenance fund and the special reserve fund are relying on fund balance there. So you can see what our projected fund balances are at the end of this current fiscal year, about $1 million for corporate, $225,000 for working cash, $35,000 for building maintenance, and $460,000 for special reserve. And then I've drafted in there what the first draft income is and the first draft expenditure. So there's some projected fund balance for a year from now, in June 2023. But again, that corporate fund balance is not accurate because we don't have salaries and benefits subject to the budget.
Which would be a significant portion.
It would be, yes, yes, absolutely. So as far as long-term fund strategy, if you remember last year, I recommended that we send down our building maintenance fund to 0. So you can see that we're expecting to start the year with about $35,000. The fund balance in the building maintenance fund, we won't have any income in the new fiscal year for that fund. We did not levy anything. And the first draft expenditures are about $41,000. So there's still a little bit of tweaking that I have to do there. And as we approach the end of this fiscal year, I'll have a better idea of what that fund balance will be. And this will be something that JP and I will have to manage in the new fiscal year to make sure that we zero out or don't overspend next month. So we've shifted some expenses from building maintenance over to the regular corporate fund. And just overall kind of a long-term strategy that will simplify some of our bookkeeping, record keeping. So all of our income and expenditures for just day-to-day operations will be coming out of the corporate fund. No longer be using that building maintenance fund. Any questions about that?
So the $41,000 amount will be adjusted for the next draft of the budget?
Most likely, yeah. And I want to reach out to our auditors to see if they have a suggestion in case we overspend that fund and it goes into a deficit. I need to ask them if it would be appropriate at that point then to transfer money from, if we could transfer money from the corporate fund over to the building maintenance fund to zero that out. And I think that that's a possibility. We've been pretty good at it. Last year we had this fiscal year, we had the Awalima Gift Fund. We worked closely with our accountants to make sure that we got that one to the penny zeroed out, which works. So it's not my hope that we can do that with the building maintenance fund as well. That's the plan. As far as income goes, this is one of the first questions I have for the board to consider. In prior years, we requested a distribution of developer donations from the city to use toward our debt certificate payments. So we just received a report from the city that they have approximately $17,000 being held for us right now. So I would just like the board to weigh in here and see if that is something that you want us to request all of that, some of that, none of that, from the city to use toward the debt certificate payment.
That was our original intention. Is there any reason not to do it?
The original intention for this, the developer donations, we were trying to save funds for the lower level remodeling. And then when our budget got very tight, we made the decision to use those developer donations toward the debt certificate payment.
Well, I honestly feel that it'd be the most fiscally responsible thing to do is to use the developer donations for the debt. Payments.
Anybody else have any thoughts?
How much will it take pay
How much
towards
will it
that? I mean,
So the debt the debt payment next year is $168,000, almost $169,000.
In our budget, can we make that payment without using this money?
I
Would
think
it be tight?
it would be tight. It would use some of our fund payments.
Be nice to have it work used for something upstairs as well.
I'm in agreement with Sandy. I would like to go back to the original plan. However, I would like to see what happens on the second draft of the budget.
Okay.
If you do not apply it, where we're taking it from to not use it.
All right. Anybody else? Rick, do you have any thoughts on
I
that?
was just wondering if there'd be something that we could take advantage of, that we would be spending more than that if we delay.
That we would be spending more than the $17,000 if we delayed taking it.
No, if we delay paying for this thing. Maybe I'm not.
Is this money, this amount, can you clarify, intended to grow, or is this the cap on it?
This is what they've collected.
So
It will
far.
only grow if there are new
Development.
permits pulled. And I really think that most of the residential development has occurred. I don't expect it to grow exponentially. We've gotten almost 300,000, no. We've gotten over $200,000 from developer notifications in the last 2 years. So that is primarily the development that has been happening in the district. I think we've got most of it.
if we chose not to use it now or include it in the budget towards that, if at some point during the year we determined we needed it to say, I don't want to say emergency, but if we needed it for something, we could request it at a later time.
Yes, we could do that.
Do they pay us interest?
No.
There wouldn't be any sort of penalty either, right? I mean,
No, because these are new funds. I believe there is a time limit on how long we have to use it. It might be 10 years, it might be 20 years, I'm not exactly sure of that. I'm pretty confident the library would use the money within that timeframe. And it's $17,000, I'm not sure that it would make a big difference. So let's, if you're okay, we'll wait and see where things lie next month.
Sounds good.
Right.
All right, so fund balance projection notes. So I did not, normally there are a couple of sheets in here that show where our fund balances are going to be for the next 4 years. Didn't make sense to do that because we don't have the salary benefits numbers in here. But just as a note, based on our current budget, the fund balance policy that we have, says we should be saving or retaining a balance of 25% kind of in reserve. So that target is about $550,000. And we are projected to have a corporate fund balance of almost $1.3 million. So they're pretty likely that we're going to have about $700,000 above our target fund balance. And the board will be able to choose whether we spend those funds, save them, leave them in the corporate fund, or transfer those funds or a portion of them over to special reserve. So there's, we do have some savings in the corporate fund. And the fund balance can help us cover several things, including the debt certificate payments, wage increases, whatever is decided there, the additional staff that some of us have requested, as well as the cost of some benefit changes if the board asks to change the benefits.
Does it cover tuition reimbursement expenses?
It would.
Consider a benefit?
Yes, that could be considered a benefit. But basically would cover any expenditure that's over the property tax revenue and our other revenue that we have. Any kind of a deficit that we have in the corporate fund. The other thing just to keep in mind for the future is that, as you all know, the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, and inflation has just skyrocketed. So it's about 7%, which means that our property tax levy, the cap on our tax levy next year will be 5%. So the board, when it comes time for the levy, will be able to decide whether you're going to capture that full 5% portion of that. But if the board, I would recommend to capture the full 5% because if you do not capture that, that income is gone forever. But you may feel otherwise, and it's fine. But if you choose to levy for the full amount, the full 5% over what we get this year, we have the potential to increase our property tax revenue on an annual basis by more than $100,000. So that will also help toward future expenses. Things shouldn't be as tight as they are now. The caveat that I didn't put in here is if the legislature decides to change the property tax limitation laws, that would change our outlook.
But that decision is separate from the budget.
That decision is separate from the budget. It's just something like forward thinking. Because not only if we decide to make some of these changes or these increases in benefits and things, it's not just next year's budget that's impacted, it's sustaining that in future years. So I'm trying to show you that there will be some additional income coming in the future if the board chooses to capture that full 5% of the levy. So
imagine why we wouldn't.
I know, right?
I think that they're really strong argument not to.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, right now, people are kind of protesting very much against it. And a lot of backlash. As
amount of money accounts. And our levy, we won't be levying until, September. I mean, we pass the levy usually in November, I want to say. So there will be time to discuss that. I don't know for sure what other libraries or other entities are doing. I do know that there are a couple of libraries that are discussing levying for that for 5%, but then if they don't use that money, they would abate it in the following year's levy. So that's always an option too. We can collect the money, but we can also return that money in the following year, which would reduce that next year's levy. So there are options. Definitely, but that will be a discussion down the road, just for you to be aware of. So I did highlight here that throughout our discussions about the budget this year, you know, we just have to consider how much, if any, of that fund balance should be used to pay for the next year's expenditures. So it's just,
So is this something you want us to have a discussion about now, or
we do not have
want to move on?
I think we need to see more numbers plugged in.
Right.
the second draft.
you may not even know that until next month after you see what the salary and benefits comes up. Okay, any questions about that?
No.
All right. So I'm going to start with the budget request highlights for member services. And these are kind of scattered throughout the big budget draft. But there really are not any significant changes from the current fiscal year. Although Jamie and her team and Kathy, the new resident mailer card project has kind of been paused. They are rethinking possibilities for another way to welcome new residents, I think through some meeting or something like that. I don't anticipate any staffing changes, with the exception of increasing the hours of one of our part-time shelters to 20 hours per week. That is the lone, I believe, the lone employee left. It's vacant right now. Position, but that's the only employee that is not eligible for IMRF at this time. And so it's been a goal of mine to get everybody into IMRF for several reasons. One, it's an excellent benefit. And two, it actually adds some flexibility when we are scheduling people. We don't have to be concerned about hitting the ceiling or the cap of hours that people work. So it's added some flexibility, I think, for scheduling. I think, would that be true, Paul?
I would say so, yeah.
Okay. All right.
How many hours does this person now work? 14?
I think it's 11.
Oh,
It was
it's-
very
Very good.
minimal, and, you know, as we've discussed before, the shelters are the ones who were hit very hard in terms of the workload when we changed over to Swan. So if they hadn't had any increase in hours, this would help a little bit with that workload as well. And then professional development and member services, we budgeted for 2 of the staff in that department to attend the Reaching Forward conference, which takes place in Rosemont every year. It's a conference for support staff. An excellent opportunity for them. It's just one day.
Is the person who's going to have their hours increased amenable to that?
It's actually a vacant position right now,
Oh, I missed
so,
that, sorry.
yep, that's okay. When we paused the hiring for that position
Got it.
for now, but when we reopen it, it will be at the
That's what.
increased hours.
I didn't-
Well, yeah, and people I would think would want more hours rather than something that's so minimal.
Depends on the person. But it helps us to have somebody here for more hours. It's a little more consistent. We can keep up with everything that changes so quickly.
But because this makes them eligible for IMRF, it will have
A budgetary.
a budgetary.
Yes.
But if it makes them stay around longer, we'll make that up.
All right, any questions about member services? I think it's kind of straightforward. All right, marketing. So I'll go through Kathy's list, unless Kathy wants to go through her list. Do we have questions for Kathy? That's what she said. Want to go through that? Sort of hit the highlights, maybe.
Highlights, as Sandy noted, library awareness is the key thing that I work on. The budget, we pays for the printing and mailing of our quarterly newsletter, which is our biggest publicity reach. We also have a subscription in constant contact for our e-news. I know there are also website maintenance costs included in the budget. Promotional items, I think she was referring to all of the giveaway stuff that we do. You know, the little tchotchkes we give out when people register for their cards or things that we give out at our outreach events. And then for the big thing is to get a full-time graphic designer. Would be much needed. Our attempts at hiring and retaining part-time graphic designers have just not worked out for us. So clearly, a full-time designer would be the way to go.
Because right now Kathy has been wearing the hat for her job. Plus she's been doing a lot of the graphic design work to support social media, the e-newsletter, some in-house signage. We're still using an outside contracted design person to work on the newsletter, but even I think Kathy, she is able to touch up some of it now. She's learned a lot, but really she should be focused on the messaging and the plans for these activities. And we should have a person who really knows graphic design on staff to do that. So do that piece.
This person be anticipated being coming on in July then after the start of the new budget year.
Yes. Yeah. I think the budget has to be approved and then we can post.
Kathy, the last bullet point under staffing, I must be lost in space. A contracted design service would replace this person who's helping you now, and then you would just have a consultant for various projects. Or what does that mean?
No, I think we currently have a contracted design service / person. We would continue using her
Okay.
Until we get somebody fully in-house.
That's where I couldn't read that.
Sorry.
So,
I wrote it, don't blame.
no,
If
no,
she wrote
I
it, it would
just,
be better.
you know, I'm going to ask if it doesn't make sense.
Right,
Why
so
are we
I
switching when we're going to a full-time person. So-
right, and I know there's not, salaries are not in that, but so there would probably be a period, like, yes, we hope to hire the new person, but maybe once the new year kicks in, we wouldn't have that person right there at the, then on July 1. So we would continue to use contracted services until we can get somebody in-house.
Would the contractor be amenable to coming on board?
No, but not the current one that I use, no.
Any reason? Is there something that you use that is only part of this person's skills or?
No, not at all. The person that we currently use actually already has a full-time library marketing job or marketing / graphic design job.
That's a side hustle.
Yes, it's a side hustle. The last time we did some, where we're looking to fill the position last fall, I got in several resumes and other email inquiries from people. Oh, I'm a contracted person. I'd like to stay that way, but call me if you need me. So I think most people who want to be in the contract freelance business will stay that way.
Would you get somebody then from College of DuPage or someplace like that? Or
I'm sorry, did I or will I?
would this be a
To
place
advertise for this
to
position.
go?
Oh, I'm sure that would be one of the places that we would advertise as we have in the past, every college.
Kathy, is this considered a graphic artist? I'm looking for the pay rate. Is it an
Yes, graphic artists
eight?
sometimes use those terms interchangeably.
Let's move on to public services. All right, public services. I'm going to go through this, you want me to go through it?
I can go through it.
Again, I wrote these, I ran out of time to work with these managers on this part this year, so I wrote this, so hopefully it makes sense.
I think so. Yeah. So the first part is library materials. If you've been following the circulation stats and other thing, physical media like CDs and DVDs have been declining at a pretty regular pace, and the e-media and e-books and e-resources have been very high over the last couple of years due to the pandemic, but they are actually still rising even though we're open in the building all the time. So what we're doing is hopefully going to restructure some of those funds, put more into e-media and e-resources, because a lot of the the costs are like cost per cert. So like Hoopla, every time someone checks something out, we get like a bill for it essentially. So since those number of circulations are rising, obviously the cost of that service is rising. So we're hoping that there'll be an increase of about $4,300 in that budget line for those. For programming, we've increased the budgets to include the 1,000 books and moments before kindergarten program, which hopefully will be launching in September. Julie and Diana have been doing a lot of great work preparing and everything like that. And plus, we're also asking for $1,000 for adult programming in Spanish. We do have a Spanish programming committee that has started in the recent months, and they are hoping that they can do a lot of the strictly Spanish programming here at the library for that. We did get the hotel motel tax grant from the city, and the concerts for the Sunday concerts and the summer concerts are in the budget there as well. For professional developments, we have a few staff members who asked us for a few things. First, Kiri, our youth services person, is interested in completing her MLS degree, so that'd be a tuition reimbursement expenditure there. Julie is interested in attending the Association for the Library Service to Children's National Institute in Kansas City. As you may know, she's part of the ALSC Notable Children's Books Committee, where she votes on every single year. So she was hoping to go to that this year. So that's in the budget as well. And we want to send 2 staff in public services to attend the IOA conference in Rosemont this year as well. And lastly, in staffing, we're trying to add 20 hours per month for an employee to present Spanish language programming. So that person works in another department. So essentially, we would have to pay them from public services budget to specifically work on that programming and presenting as well.
Is he a part-time employee that only submit to a full-time, or is it just that his hours would be really allocated in terms of the Spanish program?
The hours, for the employee's existing hours would remain the same. And then these hours, we add like about 5 hours per week. So he will remain part-time, just some additional hours. This was something, this person we discovered had a background in computer instruction in Spanish. And we learned that through the committee work that the Spanish programming committee was doing. So that was like a nice surprise.
Absolutely.
In-house.
Well,
That's
fantastic. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then lastly, if possible, we would like to promote one of our current staff to assistant department manager and promote 2 of our part-time 30-hour staff to full-time. And those obviously haven't been in the budget, but that would help with a couple different things. Scheduling, of course, but then a massive push to outreach, especially to some of the communities that we want to get back into the library. So if we have more hours, we can send more people to more things. Warrenville, in order to raise our awareness, their awareness of us, and see our offerings as well.
Sandy and Paul, I've been really thinking a lot, and I would like to make it a priority to try to focus in on employee retention. And by converting these part-time positions to full-time, is it your opinion that this would aid in employee retention?
I would agree with that.
I think so too. I think that the staff that we've lost for the past, for the most part, have been part-time employees who have gone to other libraries or have a full-time position.
I really want to keep that as a focus during our budget talks, because
And we would not be replacing any part-time positions with doing this. move.
It's current staff. So we would not be adding any people.
Is it possible when drafting the second draft of the budget to see what the cost of this would be?
Yeah.
As opposed to not proceeding? I'm not saying I'm not against it, I just want to see what the cost would be.
Yes.
I'm very much for it, but I'd like to be aware of the expenditure.
And I guess the one other question I have overall, say if we were to go forward with that, how many part-time positions would we have over, and overall?
Don't have those numbers.
Okay. I was just
Sorry.
curious
I
how-
can put that into the notes for next month.
Well, I think this department lends itself more to full-time than part-time is what I'm hearing.
Right, no, and I understand that. I just wanted to see what the balance was, like how many more in terms of two over the years, maybe being able to aid in more retention by offering more full-time positions. I know we can't do it for everybody across the board, but just.
I can create some kind of a table that compares how many part-time we have in each department and what. All right, any other questions? Mr. Wong, about public services? Okay, and then next we have Duncan. Duncan, do you want me to review this or do you want to go through it?
Go for it.
Feel free.
So moved.
So, of course, this part of the budget includes lots of hardware and software. If you want to ask specific questions about that, I have got the question to ask, Mr. Duncan. Plus all the ongoing maintenance and support of our current systems. So some of the special projects that are planned, kind of Duncan brought these to my attention, are, and these are big projects. I don't know that we'll do all of these, but these included funds for replacement of staff desktop PCs. It's possible that we might replace them with either desktops, or we may consider giving people laptops or docking stations. And most of the managers have, our laptops are fairly new, so that kind of makes that expense a little bit. There are some important router and server replacements that need to be done next year. And then there's also a budget line for replacing the public desktop PCs, the desktops, and also some monitors. That's there as well.
Any
Other,
oh, go ahead, sorry. Any idea what the quantity or the number would be?
I think that's probably included. Duncan gave me that detail, not whether I actually put it in there. So automation purchases, there will be 25 staff desktops, so they're from 2016, so they're 6 to 7 years old right now. And then the public desktops will be replacing 13.
That is all people, public desktops.
Say that again?
That's all, the 13 is our total count of public desktops.
And are those the desktops that are there now?
Yes, so but I said we should replace the whole thing because if one of them fails, because we got them all at the same time, then more and more fail.
Like a cascade, right?
Okay,
So budget the whole thing.
all right. So this is just me quizzing you guys.
No pressure.
If we went back to the configuration we had before the pandemic, that would require us to replace more?
I believe that was 6 more.
Okay,
computers, which
Okay.
will make it.
so that would increase the cost of that.
Yes.
Okay, we'll talk about that later.
A question.
Yes.
In the event, there will be some decisions made based on cost. What is the priority of these three in your opinion?
I think the router is number one, because the current router we have is support. This year. Since staff PCs are important, we could buy a few replacements to replace just some of the ones that fail, rather than replace all of them at once.
Okay.
Server replacement is a recurrent backup server that we're planning on replacing is quite issue. It is our backup. We just couldn't develop any more issues. Yeah. Important that we keep a backup. Same as the staff PCs as the public PCs. Could replace them as well.
So these are backup machines?
The server is the backup. Server planning and replacing.
As you know, Cynthia was always very good, and she's passed that along to Duncan in terms of having some redundancy. It does cost us more, but in the long run, if you had a failure, we're in good position to get things up and running. Not having to wait for them. So that's a good thing. One thing that I didn't note on here is that I'm working this possibility will be moving to a new insurance company, but regardless of that, we do have cyber liability insurance, which is if somebody hacks into our system. And most of the companies that are offering that insurance are now requiring their companies, libraries, businesses to implement multi-factor authentication. So many of you probably have seen that, where you either get a text message with a code you have to type in, or you have an app on your phone that is a random number generator that matches up to your bank account. Put that in, or you get a phone call or email. So we're looking into that.
I know the county uses off the verify. That's what I've had to do all the time.
All right, so
And I assume that's a pretty, I see.
it can be, I mean, it's, I don't recall exactly the number I dropped in here, but there is. They even put it in here.
That's why I asked, because I did not see it, but that's fine, Sandy, I just.
Yeah, I might not have put it in here yet. It could be, I think we looked at it, it might be $1,500.
Oh,
And the price maybe isn't bad, it's the implementation that it involves possibly, if we require people to use their phones or whatever for it, then we would have to pay them a stipend for using their phones. So then we're looking at buying fobs that would generate those numbers. So we haven't even really reached out to many companies about it. So I'm waiting for the insurance people to tell us whether it's something.
perhaps we should budget something for that.
Right.
Did you get guidance off of Swan for this?
We can get some guidance from Swan, and Duncan has started attending the networking group for the IT managers. So there's just on the email list, actually, there's a lot of back and forth. I know there's some back and forth on the director's email list, sharing information about companies. But everyone agrees the implementation and a lot of work for libraries. We're a fairly small library, so maybe it's not. Yes. People have been applying as a libraries that have 100 or 200. It's still. Duncan's already got a list prioritized of what systems we need to protect. What are the critical systems?
It seems like this is a lot of equipment replacing. Is there an amortization of equipment, or is there benefit to leasing equipment so that you get swap outs whenever it seems like it's going to go past a certain number of years? I heard that after 4 years you can count on it going away, and I don't suppose that's going to get any better.
Yeah, that is an option we could explore, is getting loaner equipment.
Even I'm not familiar with that, so
We just replaced ours at home and figured that, well, maybe we can get this thing worked on by a technician that used to work for Bell Labs and does that. He says after 4 or 5 years that he doesn't work on those machines because you fix one thing and the next thing goes down, and then he gets yelled at for having it bad, and then it just seems like it's a merry-go-round of woe.
Right.
think Cynthia in the past has upgraded memory, and those sorts of smaller things, or replace the fan goes bad, those can be easy to replace, but sometimes it's just the nature of the beast, and the prices have come down considerably. So I don't know that leasing them will be any less expensive.
And these public desktops, they would be pretty much just thin, wouldn't they?
Right, yeah, so currently we have the small form factor. It's, pretty much the same
I
size.
mean, it doesn't have a whole lot of guts to it or any kind of.
All right, let's move on to acquisitions and payroll.
Okay, well, I'll just add there that Duncan is actually going to be completing some certification courses, so there's some tuition reimbursement in the budget for him as well. Okay, acquisition cataloging. Mary Kelly, you want to talk about what you've got?
We
Pretty
did,
status quo. Pretty status quo.
yeah, pretty
right?
status quo. We have heard from several vendors, about prices on the uptick. I reached out to our Baker and Taylor rep and asked if they would be able to start processing books again. He said they're almost there, but when I mentioned it in other networking groups through Rails, they said, don't count on it, because apparently Baker and Taylor are still having staffing issues. That being said, I would like to attend ILA, and Gail is going to be going to Reaching Forward, and she's also completing her outspace certificate for that tuition reimbursement.
And I know Mary Kelly is struggling even with supply chain issues have come into play and things as well, so it's fun, right? So, all right, and the last piece, page 5, our capital expenditures. So we've carried over some things from last year's budget or prior year's budget. So staining the building exterior, that was last done 5 years ago. Replacing some windows because of failed seals. We talked about installing security cameras at key locations both inside and outside of the building. We've talked about that for several years now. It's just something that no one has got the time to add to their list of tasks. And the, oops, excuse me, and then replacing the public entrance doors, kind of that we've discussed today. So we've added money for them. Anything else? The roof is still in good shape.
I'm sorry.
No, the roof is still in good shape.
How about the HVAC system?
I think it's okay, haven't heard otherwise. But those are things that, you may recall last year, we moved $300,000 of corporate fund balance into the special reserve, and that's intended to offset the cost, especially of some of those bigger dollar things that will be coming in the next, I don't know, 5-8 years.
So you're going to plug those numbers in on the last page. Capital projects.
No, actually, the capital improvement projects lines that are in this budget were actually from the renovation.
Oh,
These particular items are on page 9, I believe.
I did what you said.
I know. Yep, so page 9, in the second grouping of maintenance items, there's 72,000. That's some of it, and then the security camera system is a little further down, security line.
So those are already.
And those are all out of the special reserve fund.
Alright.
Yep. Any other questions about capital or anything you think we should be looking at? And then administration, really little or no change with the exception of bank fees. Fifth Third is no longer waiving our monthly service charge, so we're paying them $50 a month on one of our accounts. We also, I think, need to implement, much to my chagrin, but we need to implement something called positive pay if we continue to pay with paper checks. As a fraud prevention measure, it would be a report that we would run in our check writing software that we would upload to Fifth Third. There's a $50 a month cost for that, so that they would check, as the checks are presented to clear, the bank would check against the list that we've submitted to make sure that those were legitimate checks. Nothing had been changed on them before they pass the checks through the payment. So that is something that we need to look at next year. Again, there's a fee for that. The bank fees are a little higher.
So our employees are not using direct deposit?
Some of our employees, but the stack of checks that Sandy was on signs every month, it's those checks. Some of our checks are, some of our staff, most of our staff are using direct deposit, but we cannot require that. It's against the water. So some have to say for checks, but it's really more so about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. And then staff development, staff recognition, if you look at the big spreadsheet, there's quite a significant increase for this item. This again, I think it's a part of a retention strategy for staff, giving them the option to participate in staff development. I see a typo now here. So I've included funds for all of our managers who supervise people to take part in some management training that's provided by HR Source. Managers can select a wide range of training topics. We all just participated in something called Legal Issues for Supervisors, which was helpful. Mary Kelly attended a 3-day boot camp for managers. Filled her head with lots of. Right. We also included funds so that all of our staff can attend Swan Expo in August, as well as funds for staff in Service Day in November. I've also included money so that we can hope to have that staff dinner again and resume some of our quarterly staff lunches. We did some things. Jackie and Gail organized some fun stuff for National Library Week, so we hope to be able to continue those in the future as well. For staffing, I have asked for a full-time position to manage all aspects of human resources. So that would be recruiting, interviewing, hiring, onboarding, legal compliance, keeping our handbook up to date, even answering managers' questions or guiding them through challenging situations with employees. This has become probably one of the most challenging aspects for Jackie and I. It is very, very time consuming, and I think, Jackie, tell me if you agree with me or not, it's taken me away from some of my regular duties. To the point where I'm not able to take care of day-to-day things anymore because we're focusing on managing some HR issues. So I really think it's time for us to look seriously about bringing on someone on board to manage that aspect of the library operations. So that's there. Staffing. So any questions about administration?
That looks like you're thinking about adding 3 effective positions then. Upping the part-timers to full-time. This person.
I don't know if it's three full-time equivalents.
I don't see.
It's moving those part-timers to full-time, that's 15 hours.
And then the
Additional,
full-time graphic, which might be a net.
right, we already have, this year we had budgeted for part-time graphic designer, so it's really adding like 17 hours, maybe even less than that, what we had budgeted this year. So overall, I can, again, next month I can present some more detailed, specific information about those positions we're proposing, so you can see what the difference is from this year to next year and figure out, what the difference is.
I'm really curious about this human resources position. I'm hoping that if we make some of these other changes, we won't have so much turnover. And I'm wondering, do we need a full-time position for this person?
Again, as Gabby said about graphic designer, if we don't have a full-time position, we're not gonna have a pool of candidates. I don't think.
anybody.
And I'm gonna tell you honestly that I am not qualified. I don't think Jackie is qualified to manage the HR as it is right now.
It's too legally complicated.
It's very
Maybe
legal.
you can say one mistake.
Yeah.
And a lawsuit. and includes more than the cost of a full-time person.
So it's something to seriously consider. It might, it might be that we have to make a choice. What position are we adding and what are we not adding? And what is that? Right. So there's that. I mean, and maybe it's not a full-time position. Maybe it's something we outsource. HR source has, they have a program where we can pay them hourly for assistance, but I can tell you their hourly rate is probably, I think, somewhere between $75 and $100 minimum. So that's, I can look into that as well.
This person would also handle things like updating job descriptions and employee handbook.
Yeah.
And policies
You
relating.
can ask these guys. I met with them all in November on job descriptions, and I haven't had a single chance to touch them.
I understand that.
So,
And they would be able to help with like benchmarking and the.
yes,
and all that stuff,
compensation, all of that. Okay, right. Okay, and the last section, we don't have to spend a lot of time on this tonight. I think this will be the bulk of the discussion next month. But salaries and benefits, again, to the point where we're trying to retain staff. We've tried to look at our benefits, see if there's anything that we can change. But for the board to consider, what percentage of a wage increase we were to staff this year. I mean, it's been pretty steady. For the past 10 years, it's usually been somewhere 2.5–3%. But with that inflation bump this year, is it something the board wants to consider giving more than that? They're all over the place. They're all over the place. Some are 3, some are 5, some are a 5 cost of living with a little more for merit.
What about private sector?
Yeah,
Have you read any of that?
I have some information from HR source. I can share some articles with you next month. With them. This was from December, which was early December before the final CPI numbers came out. And this was just all sectors, private sector probably was that salary increase budgets were heading toward 4%. That's the overall budget. Projected merit increases were upwards of 6% even. So
I only got 2.5.
yeah, so there's that. The other side of the coin, most people are saying, be generous because it's just how you get better elsewhere. Others say you've been generous in the past. I mean, we've given 3% increases in years where the inflation has been less than 1%. So we allow those steady increases over time. So we're probably, even if we stayed at a 3% increase, we'd be in line with what inflation has done. A significant bump. So I do have, I can't put my hands on it now, but I have an article from HR source that compares what is expected, I think, in the private industry versus what's happening in public sector libraries or districts. So I can see that.
COLA raises though are across the board, same percent, right?
Yes, and we typically don't give cost of living raises, so that would be a decision for the board as well to decide. Typically we only give merit increases, so the board would need to decide. If you decide we're going to allocate 4%, say, but we want 2% of that to be cost of living. Everybody gets it, and the other would be a merit pool that people would be eligible for up to 2% additional for merit. And these are things that we can look at next month.
The one question I had on here though too is how many 30-hour employees, and is that a benefit that then that they would want or
I don't know. I saw that as a way to,
I realize it's another retention issue, and I mean, I think it's a great thing, yeah, I just was curious then, I mean, I know that would be another impact to the budget, and it's just.
Right.
Well, it really would depend on if the employee had a spouse and what their insurance situation was. I would imagine that most people would want to take advantage of it if it was as good or better than whatever else they have available.
Right, well, I know that when I was working at Barnes and Noble in retail, that I worked 20 hours and I was eligible for insurance benefits, so I mean, yeah, I didn't take advantage of it because my package was so good county, but.
and one of the, I had hosted a director's meeting this week here at the library, and one of the directors, when I said it, I was considering this, and she said that their employees have to sign off, like if say their spouse has access to their own insurance plan from their own employer, then that spouse cannot be on the library's plan.
Yeah, that's essentially what they do with the county too.
The employee would have to sign off that their spouse or their child does not have access to.
And the county takes it one step further, where if you choose to take the insurance and your spouse is eligible, there's a $1 surcharge that you have to pay on top of it.
And this is not something, this is almost like a cafeteria style thing where, hey, these are choices and these are things that we can do. We probably don't want to do them all at once. But it's certainly something that I think we should start thinking about and implementing them, over time. Hey, what are our goals? We want to try.
We're definitely getting insurance benefits at one time. Look up at the time.
Sandy, library currently pays a portion of the insurance premium for single coverage. Is that a percentage of that amount?
It's a percentage, so it's currently, depending on the plan, it's either 80% or 70%. And again, it's just for the employee, and the employee who's taking the family or dependent coverage, they're responsible for 100% of that. portion.
I just didn't see the percent.
Yeah. And that's, okay, so what do I have here? The second question, I hope is an easy one for everybody. Was should the library adjust its policies to provide annual leave and sick leave to all employees? That's kind of part A, but part B is at the same rate. So right now, our part-timers get paid time off, which is at the same rate as our vacation time for full-time employees, but they do not have a sick leave benefit. So they're required to use that paid time off for any time off that they need. So if they get sick, then they have less days to use for vacations or whatever. So I'm kind of looking to even the playing field, as well as the same rate piece is that in our annual leave policy, our full-time employees and our managers are at 2 different earning rates. So there's a question there about whether we would, it wouldn't impact anyone who's currently employed by the library. They would keep whatever was in place when they were hired. But for new employees, a new manager would earn at a lesser rate than vacation time. Our managers start right now with 5 weeks of vacation. And the policy that our employee benefits employee handbook committee was looking at was that everybody would start with 3 weeks. So there would be 2 weeks knocked down for managers. But the escalation, instead of being 5 years before you get your next week added on, they suggested we reduce that to 3 years. So your first 3 years, you would get 3 weeks. Your 4th year, you would get 4 weeks.
I would say
More. So, if we're finding people are moving on quicker, this would escalate their benefit pool for time off. So that's just, I don't know if you guys have any thoughts about that. I think that sick leave for part-timers is important. thoughts about that?
Well, I think it's important because to make the suggestion that somebody has to use their, you know, it's hard then you can't use vacation to go anywhere else if you've just been sick. Or, you know, or even if you're taking care of a sick relative, then all of a sudden you're used up all your time off. So I think that's important. To be able to have that option.
I would agree. I'll just say, from always working in a private industry, our benefits are very cushy.
Not everybody who realizes that, but those who have worked in private industry often say that to us. when they're kind of-
It really has to do with which industry though. It really does. Yeah, I mean, I have a relative who, she starts with no vacation and then and lots of years of experience. 0 vacation until 6 months in, then a week. And, you know, having to use sick days if you're, I'm like,
No, sick days.
you're a 50-year-old person with lots of experience. You
And on
should
the
not
other
have to be
hand-
doing this.
On the other hand, I'm gonna put Paul on the spot. Paul is a friend who has a great vacation benefit, right?
Good.
Do you have a friend who has a good vacation? Like weeks,
Yeah, at least like 6, and
what is it? At least 6
at
weeks,
least 6.
like, you know, so.
Well, he just started a new position at 6. That's
So
what-
it really
that's what
depends
mine
on the industry.
Right, depends on the industry, depends on the job, depends on the company. But if we can't offer that, I think, and I think that that is something that I can pull data again. The data will be a year old that I'm sharing with you next month, but it seems to me that libraries are moving toward being more generous. Our pay, yeah, it's okay, but it was taken to the private industry in some aspects for what the education required, the experience, what the work is. If it was private industry, the pay rates would be significantly higher, but we try to make up for that with some of the time. That's my understanding. Okay. All right. And then the third question here was, should the library add floating holidays to pay holiday benefit? This kind of came up in our discussion of holidays. This is more about giving employees the opportunity to take paid holidays for holidays that they celebrate with the library is closed. So that's something that we're also considering.
Would you be having a time constraint? Because like, for me in the county, I do have floating holidays, but I have to use them up within that calendar year. I don't use them up in that calendar year, but then some people wait till the last minute and it creates a problem for managers at the end of the year as people are trying to use them up and all of a sudden you're going to have coverage.
As we discussed it, and we have to find some other sample policies about this, floating holidays would not be available just to be taken on any days. There would be a date by which you would need to request the floating holiday. It would probably have to be used for either a religious holiday or one of the federal or state holidays when we're closed.
Or
So,
birthday.
or birthday, we decided, yes, that would be a good holiday. So, for instance, we are open on Good Friday. So if somebody wanted to take Good Friday off, instead of dipping into their vacation time, they could use one of the floating holidays. Or Juneteenth, if we got somebody who celebrated Juneteenth, and open on Juneteenth. The person could use a floating holiday.
So those sundown, they don't carry over.
They would not carry over, correct? And it can't, I think it probably, I don't know if we do a calendar year or fiscal year, we have to make a decision, but yeah, it would not be a carryover, it would not get paid out. So that's something we're thinking of.
And would you be able to give us an idea about the cost of adding each of these options to our budget?
I can try to do that for you.
Okay.
But
Because it's kind of, it's like how, you know, one of them's gonna be significantly more,
Right,
then we aren't gonna be able to do hardly anything else.
right.
You know, if we decide on doing that, it'd be nice to know what we're
Right.
talking about here.
And I can strip down, so there's that, it's the question about changing the structure for premium cost sharing. You know, right now, every year we kind of look at it and say, okay, we're gonna stay with the 80%, 20% for this plan, 70-30 for this plan. you know, is this something that, and it's not written into our handbook, but is there a formula that we could use that would be consistent year to year? Do we take the lowest premium plan and figure that we're gonna pay whatever that 80% rate is for that lowest premium plan, or choose to do 90% of the lowest premium plan? You know, that dollar amount is what we're gonna pay for everybody, regardless of what plan you choose. That's one thing to consider, and the other, and I can give some sample numbers on that, what that would look like. And then the next question here about paying a portion of the spouse, whatever, dependent coverage or family coverage. I definitely think that is something that we need to tackle. Whether we start with, you know, a low percentage that we're paying and set a target that every year we're gonna increase that percentage by 10% until we get to a, you know, a reasonable level. I've thought about this a lot, and based on my experience, I think many libraries don't pay family insurance. They're starting to. And I think it comes from the fact that in many cases in the past, librarians were women, and libraries tend to hire women who had spouses. The husband carried, you know, was the biggest breadwinner. He carried the insurance costs. I've shared with some people here. The matter of fact discussion I had with a friend who was on a library board, who came out and said, this was when I was very young, came out and said, we hired the woman because we knew her husband would have insurance and we wouldn't have to pay it. Came out, point blank and said it. So I think that that's the history behind this, and it's time to step up and change that.
Well, I think that in the premium cost sharing conversation, we should aim towards paying 100% of some policy. I think that that's what we owe an employee.
I can put that as a,
Honestly, and you know, it doesn't have to be all options, but we should choose one and pay 100% of that.
but I can share, I can really love this spreadsheet. Are you guys not working on any? And that's true, there are many libraries that do pay 100% of the employees. And they may just do that for the lowest price plan, and then, you know, that's the $5 amount that everybody else gets.
Right.
For their other policies. So I'll consider that when I present options next month. We don't know, Jakey and I have our health insurance meeting is the day before the next board meeting.
Yeah, but right before them, it's the day before.
Yeah, so we won't have the most recent numbers, but we'll inflate them probably with a 10% adjustment to the current rates, and then see what we. And then the 30-hour employees, I can definitely bring some. Yes, or something like that. But then the rest of this, we can just look at this for next month, I would say. I did line out what the cost would be, 3%, 5%, 7% pay increase for you. This includes, doesn't include the positions that Paul talked about, the promoting someone to an assistant department manager, or the two 30-hour positions that become full-time. Those aren't in here, but everything else that we discussed tonight, Anthony's graphic designer, our HR person, it's all here, but the benefits aren't here. But this will give you an idea of what those different increases will look like. But I can break it out next month for you. I can say, they use our existing staff and we give them 3%, which is the cost, and this would be the cost of each of those. So I'll break that down next month. And then these were suggestions for the annual sick leave, the holiday information, is a little more data there. And then there's a lot of questions about the health insurance. Again, we don't have to discuss this tonight because it will be a really prolonged discussion. But I think next month we'll have to dig into some of this. Yeah.
Thank you, Cindy. This is a lot to consider.
Good job. Yeah, the information. Thank you.
I would say if you think of anything in the next, like, say, week before I really start digging into this, if there's any data points that you really specifically want to see, let me know so that I get time to compare those. unless anybody has questions on any of this stuff. But I'm kind of thinking.
All right, can I have a motion to adjourn this portion?
Move that we adjourn the budget, Warrenville Trustees Committee of the whole meeting at 7:11.
Second.
Right, motion was made by trustee Stokes. And seconded by trustee Zika. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, let's move right, does anybody need to take a break?
Yeah, maybe wash it.
Take a break. Let's try to